So this was about 8 years ago. My memories of that time are a bit hazy, but from what I remember, the first paranormal event that I experienced was a white figure walking down a hill that was right next to our home, suddenly disappearing into thin air. I saw that shit through my window and I couldn't sleep for a few days. Also, I was like 9 at the time, so I literally peed myself. A few months after that event, strange shit started happening in our house. My dad used to work in different cities and would visit us once or twice a month. So it was me, my mom, and my 2 older sisters at home, but since my siblings would be at school the whole day, the ones that spent the most time in the house were me and my mom. One day, me and my mom were home, and suddenly we heard someone on the stairs, but something about those footsteps was different. I remember that it sent shivers down my spine, and I just jumped onto my mom, who was equally terrified. My mom shouted, "Who is it?" But no answer. She grabbed a coat hanger, out of all things, and we slowly made our way towards the stairs. Also, we took like a minute or two to reach the stairs, but we could still hear the footsteps on the stairs, meaning that that thing was going up and down the stairs. In retrospect, I find that odd. Like, why would a ghost do that? Anyways, when we reached the stairs, what we say was pure horror. Thinking about that still gives me shivers and brings back painful memories. What we saw was a shadow. Yes, a fucking shadow. No body, no face, no nothing but a humanoid black mass that had been pacing up and down the stairs. I froze for a good 15 seconds till my mom yanked me in the room and locked the door. We called the neighbor and they came over and searched for any possible intruders, but they found no one or any signs of forced entry, so we didn't call the police. It was not even the worst one of it. Once I saw a boy running down the stairs to the attic. I never saw that boy again, but we would hear footsteps from the attic stairs, and they would always be in a set of 3, never more, never less. This other time my aunt was visiting, and my mom and my aunt were in one room chatting, and I was in my room. All of a sudden, we hear what sounds like a group of people talking and walking up the stairs, but we couldn't make out what they were talking about. Then one day, it all stopped. It took like a year, but everything paranormal stopped all of a sudden. We did nothing like hiring a priest or anything. We were getting used to the constant sounds and weird shadows, and it stopped. We just suppressed those memories of the events that happened over the course of a year and went on with our lives. I have never told anyone about these events because I've never found a person that would take me seriously. But I just found out about this subreddit, and it was amazing to finally find a place where I can speak my mind without being ridiculed about it. The story took place when I was a kid. My dad had been a pool man for many years. One of his oldest customers decided to purchase a ranch. I don't exactly remember where. He asked my dad if he could come and fix their pool, which was disastrously maintained before he bought it. He gave my dad permission to bring us along and told us we were welcome to stay a few days to enjoy the ranch. We drove there, and I had been in charge of reading the MapQuest instructions because I never seemed to be able to sleep during car trips. We drove back home a few days later after my dad was finally able to save the pool. The drive home was very long. For long stretches, the view was mostly desert farms and the occasional small urban town. Unlike me, my mom and brothers knocked out almost immediately, so most of the trip was just my dad and I talking or listening to music. I'm also a very avid reader, so I had a book on my lap beside the maps. I remember the ride had been quiet for a while because I had been reading. I had to stop because it was getting dark and my dad only let me turn on the dome lights to read the maps. No radio service and the Game Boy batteries had all died. All I had left to do was to look outside. All of a sudden I spotted a very tall shadow on a roof. I realized that there was a man who seemed to be wearing a hat, bowler or top hat, dancing and jumping from roof to roof of the suburban lot. Kind of like the scene in Singing in the Rain, which was at the point I had not seen. It took a second to realize that it wasn't a normal thing to see. The houses were separated in a way where a normal person could not have jumped roof to roof. What scared me the most is how the last house before a field he seemed to turn around and sense me. He bowed and tipped his hat. Even though I couldn't see it, I could sense it smiling. All I felt was dread. I turned to face my dad to see if he saw him, but he had been paying attention to the road. When I turned back, I couldn't see the houses anymore. They were way behind us. I never saw a face or any details. He was just a silhouette on the roofs. I remember the feeling afraid it would follow us. That if it could, it wanted to. I never saw something like that on our many road trips ever again. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined it, but it felt so real. The memory is as vivid as well, but it always comes back when I'm watching old musicals because the dancing reminds me of the way you moved. So this happened about 2 years or so ago, but it still sends chills down my spine whenever I think about it. There's a local factory that was made in 1890 and opened in 1891 as a sewing factory where people handcrafted detachable collars and cuffs. In 1999, it was repurposed as a bunch of little consignment shops throughout the whole building in each room. Today, there's still the original huge elevator shafts with rickety gated doors. Anyways, one night, me and my friend decided to go and check out one of the bookshops that just opened up there. We headed downstairs, went and left to the store, and eventually took a break on one of the benches before leaving. To our knowledge, nobody else was in the building, or at least in the basement with us, so we're sitting there, and the way the bench is positioned is flat up against a wall where you can see all the way up the hallway with a flight of stairs to our right and one of the shops to our left. While we were sitting there talking, I started feeling this uncomfortable feeling and tried telling my friend I wanted to leave and to hurry up because I just didn't like this feeling. He told me to calm down and that we'd leave in a minute, and the uncomfortable feeling went away. As we were about to get up and go, we saw someone come around the corner and start approaching us. We figured it was the maintenance worker, but that feeling of uncomfortableness came over me again. Yet worse this time. Now the way he turned the corner was completely unnatural. He walked to the edge of the hallway, stared at the wall in front of him for a solid 5 seconds, and then turned towards us and took a brief pause before coming our way. The way he turned the corner, though, it seemed like he just knew we were there and was completely unfazed when he saw us. I will say that it's plausible, but we're being fairly quiet, and the hallway was a solid 30 to 40 feet long, so we'd have to be talking decently loud for him to be hearing us. I went into panic mode, but my friend kept their cool. The place was still open. We were not breaking any rules, just sitting on this bench. My friend calmly looked at him and just said, "Hi, how you doing?" And the man didn't say anything. He just kept walking towards us at somewhat rapid pace. I remember looking him in the eyes. He had zero expression. Not anger, not happiness, not confusion, not nothing. It was severely unsettling, even after my friend said something to him completely unfazed. He was just on a mission to get us. You assume that this was a maintenance worker. He'd either tell us it's time to leave, or say hi back, or say something, anything, but no, just this blank expressionless face making his way towards us. After he didn't respond to my friend and started getting close to us, we just gave each other the "we need to go look" and sprinted out there. When we got out of the building and down the road, the uncomfortable feeling left me and I started calming down. We didn't really talk about what just happened. We just went on our way back to my house. So in my hometown in the middle of the Midwest, there is this gas station. It's on a fairly used road, and it's in the middle of town, a short walk from the local airport. On the opposite end is a hotel that has changed many hands over the years, but it has had a very boring history since it was built. However, the field next to the hotel is the location of interest. It's fairly large and has pretty tall grass growing. Since the day that the hotel was built, there have been stories coming from people staying in the side of the hotel closest to the field report fairly unusual sounds like scratching on windows and gasping from the outside. Weird is the apparition seen in the field. Personally, I didn't know any of this till recently. I'll get to that later. My first encounter was at the new Casey's General Store. Like I said, this gas station is right across and has never had activity, but the field is within sight, so it's easy to spot something. I visit this gas station frequently on the way to work, so I've seen quite a bit. I think the first time I saw something, I saw a fairly short, kind of fat-looking man, I assume just about 50 feet in. His shoulders just above the grass's highest point. Problem is looking right at them, they disappear, so as far as I know, it was a tall kid. Next time, there were three. A woman in a dress, a man with a ball cap, and a man in a uniform, but as I'm waiting for my gas to fill up, I realize they vanish. Looking up from the pump, I see a man across from me. He's looking confused at the field. I got to say, I said the creepiest thing I could have at that moment. They don't like it when you look right at them. He looked at me, clearly had not realized I was there. He looked horrified, but after explaining, he said he thought he'd been going crazy because he looked at the hotel and had seen them frequently, but never a good look. Apparently he got frequent complaints about customers having people peeping through their windows, and when he, the security guard, went to investigate, he'd find nothing but not even footprints. He figured out the corner of his eye while looking. We talked for a bit, seeing of any new history. He knew as much as I did, which was zip. City records says the field's never been used, and before the hotel there wasn't anything in that plot for about 70 years back. Thought it was weird, but I think things are starting to spill over to the gas station. Talking to a tenant that I've become friendly with, she said that she'd seen people buy the pumps out of the corner of her eyes. Then today I drove up. There was some kind of workman's truck sitting away from the pumps. From the cabin I could see a person. I didn't look directly at them. I could tell that they were looking at me, but I didn't even really register they were there completely. But when I came out there was a police officer standing writing something on a form. I am a good guy and was worried this cop was going to give a guy a ticket for illegally parking there. The cops are pretty ticket happy. I go to the figure is gone now and say, "Hey man, the guy just walked inside. Besides, it's legal to park there." The cop looked at me confused, saying, "You said the owner is here?" I nodded. "Well, that's not possible." Me. "What do you mean?" He pointed a little ways. A weird red stain in the rain-soaked concrete. Officer said, "The driver was involved in a hit and run. He just died last night at the hospital." Post this revelation, I realized that what was sort of going on, whether it's actually connected to the field or not, is not the point, but something weird I remember is how the figure was sitting completely facing the car window towards me and turning his whole body as he watched me. The cop ended up searching for a break-in but found nothing. In fact, the keys were locked inside the truck and they'd have to tow it. That is mostly it. Nothing crazy. Not to mention that this post is kind of all over the place. I realize that. Sorry. Usually I'm better at this, but today I'm tired and a little weirded out. For privacy reasons, I'm going to be calling myself Bree. So this was about 4 to 5 years ago. Not too sure about the dates, but here's what's happened. I went away for my parents' friend's birthday. We went to a place in Italy. I cannot remember the location where we stopped, but we all slept in this old cottage, and the owner lived next door. Everything was okay for a day, then weird things started happening. Like, I'd go to sleep, I would close the bathroom door, then when I wake up, it would be open slightly with the light on. It would just smell stuff like that. Anyways, let's get to the day where it would get even weirder. So everything was going good this one particular day. Small things were happening in my bedroom, but I thought nothing of it. Went out for the day, came back, eaten, then chilled. Fast forward to the night, I did what I did every night, then went to sleep. I closed the bathroom door and turned the light off, then fell asleep. Next thing I know, I wake up and hear a little girl's voice saying, "Help me." I tried getting back to sleep, but noticed the bathroom door was open slightly and the light was on. I left it like that and went back to sleep. I woke up again to the same voice saying, "Help me, please." She sounded young, like 7 years old, maybe 8. I stayed away so I couldn't get back to sleep. I was genuinely terrified. I managed to entertain myself when I heard the voice shout, "Bree!" constantly. I tried getting back to sleep but could not. This all continued to happen, and it was 5 a.m. before I shouted for my dad. I told him everything that's happened, and he said that nobody was in the room and nobody heard anything. Let me help you picture how the room was laid out. The door was on the far left side of the room. The bed was placed in the middle between the side table and the door. The bathroom door was on the right side of my room, and the wall next to me, if that makes any sense. Anyways, as the day went on, I was more and more scared and didn't want to stay in the room. Later on that day, the owner of the cottage's grandson came to visit, and they had a swing outside the front, so me and the boy decided to go swing and talk. I mentioned what happened, and he said when he stopped in that cottage, once he heard his name being called, and the same situation happened to him. The rest of the time we were at the cottage, I kept away from that room, and nothing more happened. I haven't been back since, and now I'd love to, as I'm fascinated with the paranormal. Also, just so nobody can say it was probably someone playing a prank on me, it was confirmed by the owner that there is a little ghost girl in the room I slept in who says people's name, but she is completely harmless. That was it. I know it wasn't long, but I find this fascinating and wanted to share it. Thank you. Have a good day. Now to start off, I, female, 19, have always believed a spirit has attached itself to me since I was very young, when my parents decided to mess with a Ouija board when I was a baby, or maybe there has simply been an entity in each house and or apartment I lived in growing up, but I just usually assume it's me it's attached to. I have numerous stories on the topic, but I will not go into it for the sake that this story is about my boyfriend, male, age 20, and I's weirdly related dreams, but I do not know if this entity is mine or something else entirely. I've always believed that whatever my spirit may be has always been a fairly nice one, or at least nice enough to not hurt me. I have never really felt in harm's way, and usually my experiences are simple bump-in-the-night occurrences. My TV or video game consoles turning themselves on and off, or the sound of someone walking around and no one being there, catching a glimpse of someone despite no one being there, hearing a voice call out to me, a door opening on its own, etc. I do find myself getting the heebie-jeebies when these things happen, but at the same time I've gotten rather accustomed to seeing and hearing these things take place. However, as I've said, this isn't about my other ghost stories. This is far more than I have experienced, and something, quite frankly, I would rather not experience again. 6 months ago, I moved into a new apartment for a fresh start. I got into the habit fairly quickly of once again living day to day of hearing my ghost friend live with me. My boyfriend, who lives in his own home, eventually started coming over more and more, spending the night as most couples would do. It seemed fine, as nothing ever really sent him off until the other night. I had to be up fairly early for my job, but for some reason I simply could not fall asleep and stay asleep no matter how hard I tried. This was never unusual, of course, for I always had trouble falling asleep as a young girl, and this followed suit well into my young adult years, so of course this night was no different. I woke up around 5:30 in the morning for no apparent reason. I had been trying to fall back asleep to no avail, of course, when suddenly, at around 5:48, I checked the time on my phone. Afterwards, my boyfriend started to scream in his sleep. When I say that the scream was blood-chilling, I mean it. I felt my heart stop and my blood go absolutely cold. I was in such a panic as I shot up and reached over to grab my boyfriend. As soon as I did, he called out my name, still in his screaming panic. I shook him as I pleaded his name, begging him to wake up. He let out one last final scream as his eyes snapped open again. immediately allowing tears to escape as he clung to me, both of our hearts racing as to what had just happened. It took about an hour and a half after the incident to even begin to calm him down. I asked him what was wrong, and he responded with, "I had a bad dream." "Did you want to talk about it?" I asked, not really thinking much of it. I had originally assumed that it was a silly bad dream, like dreams of your significant other dying on you, only for you to wake up and realize that they are in fact still alive. I was very wrong. He nodded and told me what happened in his dream. He was alone in an attic, although he couldn't pinpoint where or why he was inside of one. All he knew was that he needed to look for something, but again, as to what that something was, he had no idea. He started to look around in some boxes or for whatever it was he needed to find, but he came up empty in each one. He decided he was going to give up and just go back downstairs. When he turned around, he came face to face with his dead grandmother. At this point in the story, I immediately got chills, and the air felt much colder despite me always keeping my home at 85 degrees. I could not stop shaking for what seemed like forever. She did not say a single word, but just stared at him for a few seconds, and that's when he began to scream in his dream, which translated to the outside realm. My boyfriend's grandmother had passed for many years at this point from cancer. He said she was almost exactly as he had remembered her when she passed. Almost. She was extremely pale from what she was supposed to be. It looked like her, but it didn't feel like her. He described to me that her energy was extremely off, and she was a very religious person, so she wouldn't try to contact him just to scare him. He also explained that he has a few bad nightmares every year, but nothing had ever sent him off this bad before. I had tossed up the theory of astral projection, and maybe some entity was trying to enter him, and that's why they tasked him with finding an object. Yet had not expected him to turn around, and a few other theories, but there was nothing I could find online to back them up. Everything on seeing your dead loved ones was supposed to be a good omen, but this definitely felt like a bad one. The dream didn't even happen to me, but any time I tried to talk to him about it, on top of the chills, I would cry any time I opened my mouth. We tried to go on with our day. I even had gone so far as to have a friend come and bless us, and my boyfriend said that he felt a little bit better about the whole situation. However, that night I had a dream that I believe correlated with the dream my boyfriend just had. My dreams always take place either in my dad's old home or my mom's old home, but this one took place right in my own bedroom at my new apartment. We were laying in bed talking about something I couldn't quite remember, a bunch of gibberish, and probably didn't make sense because it was a dream anyways. I heard a girl's voice call out to us. "Who's there?" I asked to the room. "It's me, silly." The girl's voice returned, but an arm popped out from underneath my bed, and suddenly another one. She wiggled them around at me, laughing. I leaned over my bed to get a better look when her arms popped back under the bed, and she flew up the wall from under the other side of my bed. I was able to wake myself up as soon as she did that and told my boyfriend about it, but it was all too freaky. At this point, I'm not quite sure what the entity was or why it came to my boyfriend, and possibly me in a dream, or what it even wanted to begin with, but I have thought about it every day since, and I'm always on my guard. Just a bit of background info. I am an technology industry professional currently working on teaching vehicles how to drive themselves. In order for this technology to work, it uses a mix of radar and lidar to read the world around it, build a 3D representation of what it sees, and then categorize it before mapping it out in real time. Essentially, it constructs the world around it constantly to learn, adapt, and self-navigate from point A to point B and beyond. As a part of this process, we often send out mapping vehicles to pre-map the area and or determine if the area is a viable location for such a vehicle to operate in. A process we typically do at night because there is way less traffic on the road and we have ample time to correct any issues that may occur. Last year, while one of our mapping vehicles was out and about, it happened to enter into a cemetery one evening. We do not map cemeteries, but We will sometimes map the entrance and driveways of some locations in order to provide the vehicle additional options should it run into something we'd rather avoid, i.e. road construction, police activity, or an accident. In any case, the vehicle wound up going into the cemetery. A few moments later, the technician watching what the vehicle is picking up goes, "Hey man, are you seeing this?" As I stated, the vehicle will scan and categorize what it picks up in its area of operation. I look at the screen, and although the vehicle was picking up and categorizing pedestrians in the area, there was no one there to see. Even the categorization was fluctuating from pedestrian, to the unknown, to even animal. We see them pop up on the lidar the vehicle was using to scan the area and the trajectory they were headed up, and at time, look up at the real-time cameras, and nothing. Both of us are natural skeptics, but both of us have also had our experiences with things we could not explain, so it's a healthy skepticism. We kept looking for ways to debunk what it was that we were seeing, but there was no explanation we could think of. The vehicle was clearly picking something up on its lidar that we just could not see in the cameras. This went on for several minutes, and long enough that we called others over to verify what we were seeing. Whatever the vehicle was picking up that night was something that we just couldn't see with the naked eye. 2 years ago, I took my wife, my father and son, then 3, to visit family in rural New England, America. They live on a small farm with buildings that date back to the 1700s, which have been restored and modernized, and a guest house which was built about 20 years ago. My cousin is a prolific photographer, and my auntie had decorated most of the rooms in the main house and guest house with her photos. We didn't know as much about the photos in the guest house when we first arrived, probably because we were all jet-lagged. And the next morning, after a sound night's sleep, we were sitting in the main family room eating breakfast and making plans for the day when I noticed that my son was keeping his head down and not answering my father whenever he spoke to him, which was unusual because even at that young age they were very close. I looked over to my dad and noticed that he was sitting in front of a photo of a room and a run-down house. The room had a large window with sunlight streaming in, casting shadows across the length of the room towards a dark corner. I got an uneasy feeling from the photo, but didn't think much more of it. We finished breakfast and all got up from the table, and I noticed my son was walking in a wide arc around the room at the end of the table where my father had been sitting. Again, weird behavior, but I just dismissed it as a weird 3-year-old thing. Over the next day or so, I noticed him becoming more and more uneasy any time we were at the dining table, and doing whatever he could to avoid looking at the photo. I decided to ask him what was wrong, and he answered me very matter-of-factly. "The Batman in the picture is looking at me. He's very cold and he's not nice." I looked back at the picture and got instant chills down my spine. There was no man in the picture, but I got the feeling that there was more to it than an empty room. I decided to ask my cousin about the picture, and she told me that it was taken at an abandoned farm a bit further upstate. It was one of her favorite pictures, but had always given my aunt the creeps, so it was moved to the guest house. Over the next couple of days, whenever I would ask my son about it, he would say things like, "The Batman is looking at me. He doesn't like me. He wants to hurt me." I didn't think much of it until we were going to bed one night and my son tripped and fell, seemingly for no reason, in the middle of the hall and started crying hysterically. When I asked him if he was okay, he said, "The Batman hurt me on the leg." I checked his leg, and sure enough, on the side of his leg there was a large bruise that looked like he had been struck with a blunt object. I didn't want to play into his fears, but asked him how the Batman could have hurt him if he was in the photo downstairs near the table. His answer was enough for me to pack up all of our shit and move to the main house with my aunt, uncle, cousins, and big burly housekeeper right away. "He's not down there. He comes up here when we go to bed." We left soon after, so I never found out anything more about the farm where the photo was taken, but I'm sure that there was some kind of evil presence around it. Anyone experienced something similar? Please share if you have. I was 11 years old and was finally trusted to go into forest all by myself. I was visiting my grandparents in the Netherlands and Utrecht. Forgot where exactly, as they moved out ages ago, and decided to venture into the large autumn forest by myself. Keep in mind, I could not speak Dutch and did not know the area too well. The paths were very clear and explicit, but the atmosphere was ominous as I saw absolutely nobody and heard nothing, bar my own breath. I see a rabbit cross the path and began to follow it. Damn animal enthusiast kid. To see it would lead me to a family of rabbits. I haven't traveled for ages, but I lost the path and began to wander the forest, discovering new, less clear and cut-out paths for traveling. I decided I wanted to go a bit further. The path stops and I reach an area where all the trees have a red cross on them. I think it was because selective logging to cut the older trees. That's barren of any human life, and that's when I heard it. A woman scream. Not blood-curdling, but like a concerned scream. That freaked me out, and I assumed it was on some far-off farm, since they surrounded the general forest area. I decided to head back, and the rough path was about 100 meters from me. That's when the humming and footsteps started. I darted my head in all directions, but could locate nothing, and saw a dirty dildo on the floor. There's no trash or items in the forest. It's very clean, so it was very irregular. This was the last straw of my normality, and I started running. As I ran, Dutch whispers started immersing my hearing from all directions. I only knew a few words, so couldn't piece together a phrase, but this is what I heard when I was submerged in eeriness. Blood from women. Something, something dead. I hate something. Something, boys dead. Something, 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 run fast. Something, something bad. Vague, but I was in flight or fight mode until I got to the main pathway and everything halted, but I didn't stop running until I exited the park. Very strange. I constantly questioned if I fabricated the sound out of anxiety, but it was too lifelike in my memory. I was on the verge of tears, but I never told my parents since I didn't want to lose my independence in traveling. There's a lot of castles around this area, and World War II has a lot of history there, so maybe in relation to that, if I'm going for the supernatural.